Tyler, welcome to the show, man. Super excited to get to learn more about you, get to learn more about what you do. I don't know if we've had a straight up concrete guy on the show before.
We haven't.
Yeah, I didn't think
That's why I'm
so. So
excited.
you're welcome. You're the first one. So excited to learn, dive into the world of concrete a little bit. But just to begin with, Tyler, who are you? What do you do? And where are you from?
My name's Tyler Stankunas. I'm from Gainesville, Florida. I grew up, my father's been in the concrete industry ever since I was born. So I grew up always, instead of being grounded, we would go strip forms on the weekends. My dad would
Oh,
just drop
man.
me and my brothers off, and we'd work all day stripping forms, and he'd come back at nighttime and pick us up. But yeah, man, I grew up in Gainesville. I've always been in the concrete business ever since I was like 15. And yeah, and then I started high school working, started cutting grass. So when I was going through college, I owned a lawn care company, and that's how I paid my way through college.
Awesome, man.
And yeah,
Did you do that while you were obviously in Auburn?
yeah, I did it in Auburn and in Gainesville. So my first 3 semesters, I was in Gainesville, Florida, at a community college,
Cool.
and then I transferred to Auburn, and it was cool because in the summer at Auburn when I was in building science, graduated with a building science degree. I did 2 summer internships with Bailey Harris. They're a local
Mhm.
general contractor in the area, and I would work for them for like 8 to 10 hours, and then go cut grass for the last 3 hours of sunlight. And
Jeez.
I would make more money in those 3 hours of cutting grass than I did at like $20 an hour for 10 hours a day.
Jeez.
But yeah, man, I've worked for the residential GCs for Don Allen Development. They're also in Auburn, Alabama. So we built plenty of townhomes, a vet center, plenty of homes and I was just working as a laborer and a carpenter with their self-performed concrete crew. And then later on in my college career, I was like, man, I wanted to go work for a larger GC, and I chose Bailey Harris. And I also worked with their self-performed concrete crew. And yeah, man. And then my senior year, I was walking to class, and luckily I just saw Brassfield and Gorey, and I heard great things about Brassfield and Gorey, and they liked my resume, they liked who I was, and started working for those guys straight out of college as an
Th-
assistant field manager.
Yeah, Tyler. For those that don't know, what is it like working? I mean, I guess you talked about it. You got grounded and jokingly like, "Hey, man, I want to go strip forms," and you're serious about that. But what was it like? Kind of the expectation, being around a dad that was in construction, and you maybe not exactly following his footsteps, but wanting to get in that industry. Like most of the people we ask, it's intro, then how'd you get into construction? Well, we already know. But tell us about what was that like growing up, having a father that he was dead set and knew what he was doing in the industry.
Right. That's a good question, Davis. I've never really thought about it. I've always known that, me and my brothers grew up knowing that one day we're gonna work with our father and try to have the best concrete company. We'd always talked about it
It's
when we
cool.
were like 12. We'd always want to jump in the truck with him and go work with him.
That's awesome.
Um, so, and then in my early career, when I was with Bailey Bailey Harris, with Brassfield and Gorey, with Don Allen Development, I always knew I was gonna go back and work for Silverback Concrete. I just My initial plan when I started with Brassfield and Gorey after college, I was planning on working with them for like 5 to 6, 7 years to get as much information and knowledge on concrete as I could, and then come back to Silverback. But man, there was a big life change, and we did it. I worked for Brassfield for about a year and 5 months, and then I made the decision to start working for Silverback, and it's been a blessing, man.
Yeah. So what was, I mean, I'm just, it's hard to get in because I mean, there's so much in the concrete, just in the concrete itself in the construction industry. But what were some of the first things you picked up on? I guess stripping forms, but was it, as a high schooler, like you said, working with your dad, could you read drawings and structural drawings enough to know like
No,
rebar placement? Okay.
no. So that is one thing that I'm very I guess I honestly blessed for it is that I started basically from the bottom, dude. I went from stripping forms to tying rebar to finally being able to start running some forms with the amigos. And I didn't really start getting into drawings until I started working for Don Allen Development my sophomore year of college. So I was like part time for those guys. I'd go to class and then work for them 3-4 hours in the afternoons. And I was always eager to learn. I always knew, that it was going to be concrete. So I was always asking, hey, can you show me the drawings on what we just did?
So it's really interesting because, you have this whole story, but throughout all of it, you can see the work ethic that you've developed. I mean, because concrete is not an easy line of work to be in. And I don't care who you are.
It's not.
It is not easy. And especially if you're doing this when you're young and in high school, right? And then you're on side, you're also cutting grass and you're working for another company and you're putting yourself through college. You're doing all this. And so obviously your dad has instilled this work ethic in you from a very young age. How has that played out in your life going forward to where you are now? Because not everyone has that, right? A lot of people are just content with doing the bare minimum, making enough to survive, and then calling it a day and watching Netflix, right? But obviously that's not you. Because one, you are where you are now, and you could have easily just gone and said, "Yeah, I'm just going to go work for my dad," right? Like I got it. I got an in to a company. I don't have to worry about it. But instead, you said, "No, I want to go on my own. I want to go try to do a different route. I want to learn as much as I can in another area of construction, right? And then come back." And so it depends on who you ask, right? But you chose the harder road, the road that requires.
Man, honestly, man, I'd have to give all the credit though to my father, because growing up, man, I grew up, I would say more wealthy than the average person. Was very blessed, but that was because of my father's work ethic. But even with that being said, man, he wouldn't give me $10 to go to the movies with my buddies. I was either cutting the yard or pulling weeds, cutting trees, fixing the fence. So there was never a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon where I wasn't out there working on the house or doing something for my father. So I do have a great work ethic, and I definitely got it from my father. So
that's really cool.
Where'd y'all get the name Silverback from?
So we changed. It was Southeastern Concrete Pumping like 2.5 years ago, and my dad just loves the idea. He always told us growing up that we just are like little gorillas. There's a lot more to it, because I was actually with Brassfield and Gorey when the change happened from Southeastern Concrete Pumping to Silverback Concrete.
Yeah. And
my father he's got a good story behind it, but kind of forgot, brother, to be honest with you.
I was gonna say, let's go into the concrete, but if you got something else, go for it before we.
No, I mean, just real quick, Tyler, man, I'm huge into just the branding and marketing side for the younger generation. So when I see y'all's website, man, it's top notch. Like, it's sweet. Like, anybody young gets attracted or gravitates toward that. So anyway, Walker, go ahead.
But yeah, I completely agree. Your website's really awesome. Coming from
it is a bad to the bone logo.
I mean, it is pretty sweet.
You see a concrete truck driving down the road with just a big old gorilla on the side.
Yeah, like, heck yeah.
It's pretty catchy.
It's like that just fits like a concrete truck, man.
It's so funny. I was a little iffy about the gorilla at the beginning, because I was like, Dad, I just don't know, how professional it is. And man, everybody loves it. Everybody's asking for the gorilla hard hat sticker.
Let's dive into a little bit about Silverback Concrete, right? So one, what exactly do y'all do in the concrete industry? Do you do finish work? Do you do just supply the concrete, all the above?
Man, that's a great. So within like the last 2 years, we have been trying to create a monopoly in the concrete industry. So 2 years ago, we were just, it's a problem for concrete companies who you can't, when you like go to a new town, it's hard to get concrete on the books, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I might have this this slab prepped, ready, inspected. We're ready for concrete,
Right.
but I can't get concrete for two or 3 weeks.
Yep.
Because they're just booked
Schedule.
up.
Yep.
Right. And I mean, I've called batch plants and they were 3 months out, and it's like, holy cow,
Wow.
you know, like. So 2 years ago, man, we started with 2 volumetric trucks, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with those, but those are the on-site trucks. It just carries rock, sand, water, cement, fly ash, whatever admixture you're going to add, but and then it makes it right there on site. And we started with that in our residential division. So we're a turnkey concrete company in the residential, commercial, industrial. We'll build a bridge and we'll pour a back porch for an old lady on a Saturday morning. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
And so we started with 2 volumetric trucks 2 years ago for our residential company, and then we realized how easy it was and how much cheaper per yard it is. I mean, instead of us paying, I don't know if I should be saying this.
Yeah.
Instead of us paying $175 a yard, we're getting it for like $88 on an average a yard. So right there, we're saving tremendous money.
Wow.
To where we can kind of lower our price a little bit, but still make the same profit margins.
Right.
But yeah, so we started out with 2 volumetric trucks, and 2 years later, now down the road, we have 4 plants in Florida, 2 in the Orlando area, and then 2 in the Gainesville area,
right,
with 12 trucks total. So, you know, if we have a big job in Bradenton, we can send 120 yards there, or we might bring a whole silo there and dump 300 yards. So
what's the biggest pour y'all gotten out of them so far?
The biggest pour I've done was like 86 yards.
Is it, were y'all supplying the concrete too?
No, we weren't supplying the concrete on that one.
I was about to say, man,
that was a tilt wall job in Greenville, South Carolina. That was a cool job.
Yeah, I'll take an hour from there.
But I mean, honestly, brother, we're Silverback Concrete. We are a turnkey contractor, and we just started supplying ourselves with concrete. Now we're up in Virginia with our commercial division, and like we were saying earlier before the podcast started about the batch plant, we just bought a pretty bad to the bone batch plant. We got 8 front end loader trucks coming and 4 more coming in September.
Oh man,
sweet.
So
let's go.
We're excited, man, and we it's just, man, it's a blessing because we've got plugged in with some great GCs. Like we're working with Skanska, and those guys are amazing. We've been doing a couple of jobs with Whiting Turner, and they're interested. You know, they're asking us to bid more work.
That's pretty cool. So, from my understanding, this is going to be your first batch plant, correct?
This will be our first batch plant, yes.
Okay. So then how?
And man, we're fired up, dude.
Yeah.
We're fired up.
Tell me about how that works, because for people in this podcast that don't know, like Walker does, because he had a job where they had all the ready mixture ready.
Yeah, we had a batch plant. Well, we had a batch plant on site because we were doing a tilt up project as well, and so you're pouring just a crap ton, you know, concrete every day, and there's no point in bringing it in off site.
But before the average listener, you know, that may be new, that might be in college right now listening or in high school, walk into the steps of what does it take, because most people don't, you don't may have to go into the science of concrete, but people don't realize the admixture, everything that makes concrete, but then also they don't realize just the mix design and how that changes. So you don't have to get too scientific, but what is that like, and how do you make concrete?
All right. Well, I mean, a batch plant, it's kind of hard for me to explain because it's kind of out of I'm over the commercial division, so I'll just give you my best, I guess, input on a batch plant. But basically, it's a huge, you'll see huge silos, huge telebelts, right? And you load the rock, the sand, the fly ash sits in these huge silos. And then, I mean, like you said, with the mix designs, there's so many mix designs, and it's pretty cool because you just plug it into the computer, and then it'll go into the plant, and it'll put the exact amount of cement, exact amount of fly ash, the exact amount of water,
Wow.
whatever admixture. If
I
you're
didn't know
putting
that.
super P, and the same with the sand and the rock. And then there's so many different types of rock you can put in your concrete, like small rock, 57 stone, and it's kind of interesting, man. So we're doing a lot of work on these data centers, and man, with all this power, these guys have to pour these duct banks, and they have to use like a thermal concrete, which
Whoa.
it's you use pea gravel instead of like 57 stone or 89 stones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder why
So
that is.
that's something I learned. Yeah, I know. It's pretty interesting.
Why is that? Do you know?
I honestly I don't. I think they're worried about the heat or something, with all the power going into these huge data centers.
For y'all's for your Virginia division now, you're focusing on commercial. Is it going to be all
Right.
wet mix, like you just drive there and pour it, or you all also going to do the dry mix trucks that you're talking
No,
about?
we won't do the volumetric trucks. Just
Okay.
because like with volumetric trucks, it can be, you're just not going to get the best quality every single time, man.
Gotcha.
Sometimes, they don't. Volumetric trucks are great for like residential and some small commercial.
Okay.
Because every volumetric truck's going to be different, right? This volumetric truck might be producing the exact amount of cement, rock, sand, water in the mix design. And then one volumetric truck might have a little kink, and it might not be dumping enough cement. Or, I mean, I'm not saying that the results are that bad, but, on a big commercial job, you wouldn't want to use a volumetric truck.
Okay.
And even on some of the specs, they'll say, no on-site or on-site mixing trucks.
Interesting. Didn't know that.
For that reason. Yeah.
Yeah, man, it can get really. I mean, I love concrete and it fires me up, but it can get pretty scientific. Like I was on a federal job in New Orleans, and I'm not some concrete expert, but I love it. And I had a QC guy, the regional QC guy, come in and like was trying to tell me about, this has been sitting for too long and all this stuff. And I was just like, man, I have complete faith in my concrete contractor. Like he knows when it's setting up or not. Basically, they poured 3 or 4 mechanical pads and half of the other one was just sitting there. And it was sitting there for a little while. But the guy's like, we got it. It's not, there's no worry. We didn't have anything crazy. Like, not a hot day. Like, it's going to be all good. I'm like, all right, I trust you. And so like, he was literally like had a stopwatch and was like, if it went over 90 minutes, he was like, you're gonna have to rip all that out. And I'm just like, oh, like, wait a minute, like, wait, we paid for this. Like, what? Like, what's going on? And it's just like there's stuff like that on. Depends on the job, right? Depends on the specs. Depends on what's going on and who's watching. But it can get pretty crazy when it comes to timing and how long it sits in the truck and all that.
It's funny you bring that up because that can be one of our biggest worries, So say like we're in a huge pour, we're pouring 800 yards, and the boom pump gets clogged up for 30 minutes. Well, all of a sudden I have 9 concrete trucks sitting out there.
Yep.
And that 9th truck might be sitting there for an hour before I get them dumped out.
Yep.
So, and I still have to pay for those 10 yards. That's basically $1,100 to $1,400 sitting in that truck.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I have had to send trucks back because of the 90 minutes.
Yep.
Another crazy
yeah,
thing.
we try to avoid those. We try to avoid those. Always have a plan B. If the pump goes down, you got to have a plan B.
That's right.
A way to where you can get the trucks in, tailgate it. If you can't do that, I'll even have a little trailer pump on the side, or just something.
Right.
Another thing that's pretty interesting that I learned, especially we were talking about today, but our architect or our engineer wants a low air mix, and they have all these reasons for it, right? But one of the concrete guys we're dealing with, they're like, we don't ever really do low air, like we can, but we just don't, and they really want it, right? And I didn't realize all the different calculations and benefits or disadvantages that come with just the air volume within your concrete. Like not a lot of people think about that, right? And it's like there's so much science behind what concrete is, and for the layman, for the people who aren't in construction, even for some of the people who are in construction, you don't realize the amount of science that goes into just making a truck full of concrete.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, man, and it's only getting more and more and more advanced, you know.
Yeah.
So like one thing we're proposing up here in Virginia is there's a fly ash shortage, and it's hard as a new batch plant starting up. It's hard for us to get cement, rock, sand, and fly ash because of all these allocations, because they're not going to drop a customer that's been using them for 30 years just because a new guy wants to start. So we're looking at new ways. Instead of using fly ash, we're trying to get a liquid fly ash, which I've never heard of until like 2 days ago. I was eating lunch with my big brother, and he was just telling me all about it, because he's got the concrete mix design, the mixes. He knows everything. You know, I'm just out here managing the jobs, the people, the schedules. But yeah, it's funny you bring up the air though, because like for one of these jobs on the interior concrete, it had no air, but on everything on the exterior, it had a 2% air in it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So
That's weird.
That's really low, because usually the usual is like around 6, at least for where we are. But our specs is like 4 plus or minus, and that's like they're like, man, this is really low. I can't imagine 2. So,
yeah. And then for our interior mix, man, there was no air in it.
Interesting.
Really?
Yeah.
So now let's talk about more of the side of Tyler, what you're working with daily. So we kind of hounded you on the science of concrete. So let's talk about you getting to run the crews and what that's like. I'm sure going from, like you said, working from Bailey Harris to B&G, getting to get some of those opportunities like you've told me before, but now you're getting to do it for your dad's company and your company. What is it like? Because man, those guys are your guys, right? Like their livelihood is on you and your family. I mean, what is that like doing that? And also, what is it like getting to run your own crews?
Man, honestly, brother, it's awesome. Like when I wake up in the mornings and I get to go work with my brothers and with some of my best friends, because we're Silverback Concrete, we're young, man. Our general superintendent's 28 years old, who's my big brother's best friend.
Wow.
And then my other big brother's 2 best friends work for us as well. And that's amazing when you can wake up in the morning and I'm calling my best friend who might be in Florida while I'm in Virginia or Georgia, and it's 4:00 in the morning. He's fired up and I'm fired up. So, but honestly, man, it was a big transition from working for somebody, working for Bailey Harrison, working for Brassville and Gory, being told what to do, how to do it. They were providing me a schedule, and then I was just going out there and trying to execute it and perform the best I could. And then now my role, man, I'm the head honcho, so I'm telling these guys where to be at, and there can be times and weeks where I have 150 guys under my name,
Wow.
And I'll have 6 jobs going on, and all I do is I'm the project manager / VP over it. So I just try to prepare the superintendents the best I can. So I try to dive through the drawings, understand the drawings, get my man all the material he needs, which is easy for me because I've been in the field for so long. I know exactly how many turnbuckles he's going to need to form up the wall, the little stuff. So, and then, after I do we get the job, I create the schedule, get my man ready, the superintendent, figuring out the manpower for the job, I think is the biggest thing where you can make or break your profit.
Yeah.
You can put too many guys on the job. Like just an example, man, if you're forming up a wall and you put 8 guys on that wall, I could put 3 to 4 guys on the other side, and those 3 to 4 guys will produce that wall. That wall will go way faster and way more smoother with just 3 or 4 guys rather than 8, and that's one thing Brassville and Gory taught me. One of the executive general superintendents, he was like, son, you ain't gonna be nobody until you know exactly how many guys and exactly how many days it's going to take to do this. And then ever since he told me that, man, I've really just tried to pay attention to controlling the manpower, and just always being steps ahead.
Yeah.
You got to be steps ahead of your guys to be successful. My layout man's got to be 2 steps ahead. The material placement, my material needs to be there laid out before that crew gets done with the next task. That way, when they're, 5 minutes, they clean up. The next task, it's already laid out, materials there, they're ready to bang.
Mhm.
And that's how we operate. I make the layout guide. You need to be 2 steps ahead. And then I always have a guy, 1 or 2 guys doing material placement. And that has, man, every job we do, we beat the schedule on almost every single one of them.
That's
And
cool.
and it's not because of me. I mean, we have great guys, but I think just having the passion and just the go get it attitude, it rubs off on your guys. And, it's pretty awesome, man.